The Oscars suck. Not people named Oscar, you guys are cool. Why does anyone watch the Oscars in plain 2025? I care about one category only because it's a personal affair to me, and that's the best animated feature. But of this year's 5 nominees, which really deserves the award? Well, predicting the Oscars is kinda like circles, it's pointless. It makes -2 cents. 2023's Deep Sea didn't even get nominated despite being one of the most impressive looking films ever. Maybe it's slightly over animated, but they still skipped on the nomination because it was quote unquote too pretty apparently. The awards are a complete joke to me, but not the actual animations, so I decided it would be a fun time to say what I think about each of them. Hit it! Or don't actually hit it, it's gonna break. Even though this isn't my least favorite of the 5, this being 4th place, I don't think it does anything deserving of a nomination. Aardman's stop-motion animation has been fantastic. The texture work here is spectacular. The way they get towels, leaves, and grass to look appropriately sized is nothing short of amazing. I can't stop feeling like I wanna grab this penguin and just rub his smooth skin. The movement of the whole animation is smooth. It's very key posy, but that's part of the style in the franchise, and they did make facial animations even more expressive and extreme than usual. But then I sat down to watch it and I realized, well, there's not a single scene that tops any of the franchise's work. Nothing is as fun as the train chase scene from The Wrong Trousers. The animation tends to feel too clean. Part of the charm with stop motion for me has always been the occasional fingertip or misplaced clay chunk that has gone by relatively unnoticed. Some of the stretching of the character models here was just taken too far, such as Wallace's mouth being way too obtrusive because they're trying to respect his design. Honestly, these are all nitpicks and they don't affect the watching experience except for the fact that nothing was ever as cute as Shaun the Sheep. Unforgivable. Story-wise, I've got not much to say either. I don't think it's the most creative story, it wasn't particularly nuanced or stood out to me as anything worth analyzing. It discusses intriguing ideas about the advantages and disadvantages of technologies, with things such as using technology to replace the work a human should be doing, perhaps even enjoy doing it. Which is a relevant problem to the current day considering AI and all, but is it really saying anything people won't realize in due time? Okay, I fear it may, but I choose to have a tiny bit of hope in humanity. I also cannot get over that reporter voiced by Diane Morgan, because this woman's just Kong for me now. She will never not be Kong in the next 10 years. Let me talk about the other movie that I don't think deserves a nomination now, which I have a lot more to say about. Inside Out 2 is the highest grossing animated film ever, surprising almost no one. I bet you I'm not the only one who discussed a sequel with the people whom I went to watch the first one right after, because the oversimplification of emotions made it extremely easy to wonder what sort of wacky emotions a sequel had in store. That is to say, I don't find the sequel unnecessary, one or two, but as expected, the chances this one had at being better than the first were slim to shady. Inside Out 1 is genuinely well written, playing a lot with its metaphors, whereas 2 is just kinda rethreading ground at doing it worse. Take the story for example. Part of the nuance of the first installment was having joy, the personification of happiness, feel sadness. It completes that message of the original movie where emotions grow more complex with age, becoming a constant contradiction that doesn't always react predictably with changes or decisions we make. The second instead decides to introduce new super specific emotions like envy, which is an emotion so popular everyone recognized that in fact it may even rival Goku or Jesus Christ. Plus, there is not a single moment where those emotions surpass the complexity of their name. This sequel is a blatant step backward from the first. Beyond that, the events are a checklist. Let's do the first film again, but slightly change the roles. Even the emotional story beats come off as manufactured. Disney has been using this strange trick for the last 5 years where they use the specific music and lighting to make you feel emotional, virtually manipulating the viewer into the emotional moment. An effective tactic, but distinctly shallow under a critical eye. Am I actually sad at this girl's anxiety attack, or did they just pim pom, beep beep pom, pim pom, beep pom, until I started feeling sad with no real foundation? It's cheap. I prefer it when movies are truly emotional. I want to cry at a rock having googly eyes and a scene with no music and no dialogue, not whatever this over-designed bullshit is. Doesn't help either that the animation is nothing particularly good. Though I appreciate how the emotions resemble fluffy airbrushed glitter clouds, I don't feel like it pushes animation in any way a studio with Disney's caliber should. It's very tenuous and one of the reasons I don't think it deserves a nomination. Still, it feels more appropriate for a nomination due to its box office success and overall project scope. This leads me to a bigger issue. These 2 films that I've just talked about shouldn't be nominated at all. I understand Disney is Disney, the Academy is forced to nominate at least one of their films for the award, but I'm inclined to believe they really shouldn't. Disney has fallen behind most animation studios because they don't really need to innovate or change up their style. They never get me thinking, wow, that's such kill animation, to the point where they're practically nominating the brand rather than the film and their merits. Why are we rewarding mediocrity? Disney will not pick up on that message unless something big changes. Wallace and Gromit can stay if you want. I disagree with them being here as a result of more movies with more interesting elements coming out in 2024, but having Disney here is clearly because of some unwritten rule. This is the kind of shit that I feel makes people not respect the Oscars anymore. If it were up to me, I'd replace these two films. One of the spots would definitely go to Mononoke Caracasa, although the visuals often had too much detail and the overexposed colors made it genuinely difficult to look at the most detailed cuts. With the paper overlay being way too pronounced, the animation here is still superb and constantly takes after an absolute piece of art. It helps that the story is also pretty good and understandable, particularly for Mononoke standards. That stupid medicine salesman keeps getting me excited, and not only because he's hot, but because he shows up in like mega anime mode and slays while the soundtrack is also slaying. I'd be unsure which other film to replace the other one though. There's no shortage of contenders. We've got The Day the Earth Blew Up for 2D animation, Look Back was fantastic in its own right despite its briefness, Transformers 1 was apparently really enjoyed by the fans, so it's evident many other productions were worth nomination. Perhaps too many, which is why I feel the lack of Japanese and 2D animation in this year's roster is particularly blatant. DreamWorks' work pushing the visuals of animation towards a more unique direction lately has been insane. But the Wild Robot, despite looking notably pretty as fuck, is not standing out in other departments. The plant life and environments throughout are gorgeous, but not overly detailed, aiming for a specific look which is reminiscent of painting, and thus the focus on a lot of shots is showcasing all of those natural elements. It looks fantastic. Even the color selections for certain elements are bold, like with the pinkish red fire that echoes my hair. If there is anything this film unequivocally delivers on, it's visuals. Sadly, the story was delivered by the new pizza guy and it's sorta cold. The dialogue parts I love. Having Ross the robot protagonist sorta frame everything around technobabble, exploring nature as programming is just really clever and fitting. Yet a little worn out. Ex Machina did it, Blade Runner did it, Her did it, it's nothing new when it comes to sci-fi storytelling. And the same thing can be said about much of the contents of this film. Characters who are a part of a species but get rejected from the group because they are different have been done by Ratatouille and fucking Ice Age. Protagonists that sacrifices or almost sacrifices themselves to protect a childlike figure has been done in Kick-Ass or Wreck-It Ralph. So on and so forth. The sum of elements makes something new that's clearly not ripping off anything. In fact, it's based on a book, so... But each of those parts doesn't really tickle any buttons for me, in part because I don't have any buttons to tickle, I'm not an AI. And that's kinda the crux of it, right? The film hinges on this deep emotional resonance, but if you're not wired to feel that connection, if you're not an AI grappling with humanity, it feels like watching pieces you've seen before get shuffled around. It's like they pulled from the greatest hits or emotional sci-fi and Pixar-esque storytelling, hoping the combination would spark something fresh but failing. I can appreciate the craft, the polish, but it doesn't really move me. And I agree only briefly with that last part. I kinda stole this paragraph straight from ChatGPT because it would be funny to say I'm not an AI and then do that. Unluckily for me, this paragraph does explain my overall thoughts on the Wild Robot pretty well. I still really liked it, particularly think I wanna have 3 at home, but yeah, nothing that really clicked with me. Really though, I'm just offended at the lack of rabbit characters. Shout out to the director recording his reaction to the nomination event, because reactions aren't usually this Latvian. The dog, the apple, the sweater, it's the perfect trifecta. Can almost make a grown man weep. In the last 6 months, Flow is the only film that I could actually go watch properly in cinemas, which for some reason started to refuse to bring movies in their original language here in Mexico. It's literally an insult to me, and now I can't watch anything that's not in Spanish or lacks any dialogue, especially if it's intended for a general audience. I'm kinda glad then that Flow lacks dialogue, focusing on a group of animals on a boat trying to survive the flood apocalypse, and with a visual style that's wicked. The characters being animals makes it really fun to react audibly to the movie, if only because you say stuff like, haha, they made Lemur angry, or no, help Capybara! Reading anything about the characters is hilarious when using animal species as the given names, at least to me. I got properly pissed off when that
fucking bird that I hate
came up to Bird and threatened him for trying to protect the cat. What an asshole move. The most evident standout about the animation is how evident its usage of Blender Eve is. While there's visual shenanigans to hide Blender signatures, the way the lighting works and the lack of height maps on textures most definitely gives the engine away. I don't think it's a bad thing overall. In fact, it's extremely inspiring to know that tools you use yourself can result in a full product if you give it enough time. The story was made to fit that artistic nature, resembling an animation showcase first and a movie second. I remember I watched this part where the characters end up in this Venetian-style city and I thought to myself, Hey, this looks exactly like the first tutorial I looked into when I was trying to learn how to make water in Blender. Most visuals akin to the rain or fish come off similarly, so how much you appreciate them kinda depends a little on what your perspective is from person to person. This odd narrative visual separation happens because the nature of the story is more abstract and up to interpretation, showing you a weird world that has a lot of questions and very few answers, which you could probably equate to the way an animal sees the world. There's probably an explanation to why the cat is alone in this overgrown world, yet still lives in a house where a human seemed to live some time ago. Maybe the humans heard about the flood and left, maybe they simply vanished one day, maybe they got abducted by aliens. You can obviously fish for answers, but the movie isn't about those answers, it exists to be interpreted with only a few evident messages. I've heard people go as far as to describe this film as mythologic, and that goes to show why this story here isn't for everyone. You'll enjoy the proportional amount that you'll want to take from it, which in turn makes it not as accessible as its adversaries. I'm gonna do a brief spoiler segment for this one because it's kind of interesting, I like talking about this movie, but here's the footnotes. The story is about going with the flow. I don't think it's surprising to say that the message of the story is about how we can defy our bad habits and grow with the help of those people around us, even if we barely see eye to eye. The characters in this film meet each other out of necessity to survive their situation, which leads them to finding some form of family to rely on. The horrible situation brought them together, but by the end they realized the resolution to that horrible situation came at the cost of one of their friends. It's essentially saying that bad stuff leads to good things, and good things lead to bad stuff. Since it's not our job to control or fix that stuff, all we can do is find a way to keep growing around the people we love. The end of the movie even implying a potential return of the flood. Hardship will happen, so it's important to learn to live with the balance of the good and bad stuff that comes with that hardship. Bird is a super complex character despite the apparent simplicity of every surrounding element. I'm unsure whether his raptor represents his death, his departure, his passing of the torch to Cat, or even if it's meant to be a hint about whatever happened to humans. All I know is that it's really fucking pretty to look at. One could interpret Bird to be a mentor figure for Cat, and also an inherently flawed person, or I guess animal. This is really smart because it leaves his departure as a huge question. It's implied he left because the group didn't need him anymore, but whether you see this as a positive or negative reaction can easily sway both ways. Was it a, I taught you everything you need to know, now I must leave? Or so turns out I'm useless to you all now, and prior abuses of my person made me believe that staying around any longer can result in me getting hurt again. Bye bye. It's neat, but not for those who'd prefer their stories given straight. Alright, I've flowed enough, I don't wanna be liquid anymore! And here we reach what I believe deserves the win for this year's Best Animated Feature Award. Memoirs of a Snail is one of the few films where the main character going, I am the Memoirs of a Snail, and snailing all over everyone would be a negative outcome for them. Okay, but I'm gonna be serious. This movie is genuinely awesome, particularly the character writing. The more I think it over, the more I notice the little bits and nuances of them all. Except for whatever this crazy Christian lady is, she's generally one note on purpose. In contrast, I love Pinky. The way the overall tone of the film tends towards tragic and, I wanna say realistic, but that's not quite right, it just has a certain verite, showing the life of the characters fully, what's included. That makes Pinky's more comical and unrealistic memories shine even brighter. You really truly enjoy every single scene with this old lady. I kinda love how she takes care of the protagonist, but never cuddles her. Given that Pinky values independence, it makes far too much sense for her to be a nudger rather than a pusher. They managed to find a way to characterize a bombastic character with expert subtlety, which leaves your brain a lot of time to realize her complexities, even if only after you're looking at the credits. I also want to shout out how character traits were handled. They don't ever portray Gracie's mental illness, pretending it gives her any bonuses, and I love how it strays away from the romanticism we've seen recently regarding similar characters. They downright neglect mentioning what her exact diagnosis would be, because what matters is the challenge they entail, not their designation. Compare that to her brother's character, where him being a pyromaniac is completely relevant to the story, so they take the time to establish it. It is a breath of fresh air to see neurodivergent characters that are more than their labels. I can actually discuss why Gracie is a great protagonist, the way she relies on others, defaulting to her snails when others aren't around, or her philosophies around fighting her own battles but not letting emotions take her over, such as with keeping the hat at the end or recognizing that the person who was in a relationship with her due to a fetish genuinely loved her. Not that that removes the fact that it was an extremely toxic situation she needed to turn away from, but I like the dedication to not immediately turn towards extremes, because extremes ruin grounded narratives. It would have been so easy to call this guy scorn of the earth and portray him like he's the devil, but they appropriately showed everything good and bad about that relationship. Still a bad person, but not all bad. It's a similar situation with her adopted parents, where they were generally the opposite, well-meaning people, though practically overdoing it. I think that's what makes this magnificent, if a little harder to access for commercial audiences. The stop-motion animation is distinctive. I love how the character designs are so completely unconventional. They manage to look grotesque, uncanny, and cute at the same time. A balance that may be hard to achieve, but it makes it instantly recognizable. Instead of the direction being focused on realistic graphics, they went for this stylized cartoony look which noticeably veers away from the stop motion feel, making everything appear closer to CG animation in feel. Though of course, the people still see stop motion, it's an art style, not magic. Creating props rather than models is a positive design choice that makes this film feel very personal. I think it's wonderful. There's such care to the cinematography and color palettes, using very scarce amounts of bright colors that aren't close to brown or yellow, giving the film a sepia look which complements the snail motif greatly. A motif that shows up all the time here, whether it's as a direct visual or metaphor. Even the pace of the story happens throughout many years in reference to snails moving slowly. Simply the most complex nominee, and I truly hope it wins the award. It deserves it. Sadly, the state of the award ceremony and the reality that it's running on pedigree alone means I hold no expectations for a serious ruling. Even if my preference wins, the reason for its victory will not be any genuine argument similar to the ones I've mentioned here. It's almost silly how the Oscars disrespect audiovisual media to focus on celebrity culture, but consequently, every award show that's currently somewhat regarded does the same thing because it's what people want to watch. I'm just a rabbit guy, the kind who eat carrots, cuddle plushies, and tell people that, believe it or not, I do pay taxes. That is to say, I don't understand celebrity culture. I find very little value in highly praising individuals solely on their outfit or success. And yet, what bothers me most is not that people enjoy something I don't. On the contrary, people enjoying something that I'm not into has a way of making me happy. What bothers me is how the superficiality of the concept ends up being echoed into the handling of the media, added with the inability to even say what the Academy ranks to avoid more blatant pandering. The result is an absolute joke. A joke that stopped being funny at least a decade ago. The cultural impact of the awards outweighed their purpose, which leaves me with a single question to make. Where did respect for media go? I guess I should predict the winner. 3 of the 5 nominees are totally fine by me, but if I had to go for something based on the Academy's track record, the award is very likely to go to Emilia Perez. They really animated themselves to release it, hence it counts, am I right? 12 nominations for this masterpiece and 0 nominations for Deep Sea. Which, hey, considering that the video is about to end, I did tell you to go watch it after the video, right? Me duele la vulva de tan solo pensar que no estás suscrito. YouTube cortó la lana, cerró la llave, ya no hay impresiones.